the Inner Game Podcast. Brought to you by the Science of Excellence. Presented by Rob Hume, the leading elite athlete mental performance coach. Unleash your power.
Welcome onto the Science of Excellence podcast, the Inner Game. Nick Clark, really fantastic that you could make it with me here tonight. I really appreciate you giving up your time to do this. And I know anybody who watches and listens to this podcast, you're gonna get to see, hear, and feel a really interesting journey from somebody who has progressed and lived through a fantastic sports career, but also then had some real challenges outside of sport, and we're going to delve inside the mind of Nick and just find out a little bit more about it. So that the Inner Game podcast is all about trying to unpick the mind of athletes and try to find out the nuggets, these words of wisdom, these actionable steps that other people can actually learn from to help them with their progression in trying to become an elite athlete. And also, I want to be able to help athletes who don't quite make it, and those who have finished playing, and to be able to give them some tools, some advice, some words of wisdom which can help them deal with the pressures, if you like, of being and striving to be an elite athlete. So thanks again, Nick, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
So
glad to be here.
We're going to just start right back at the beginning then. What was it that first drew you to your sport, your sport in football? What was it that got you playing originally?
I think when you start school and you see your friends and stuff start, especially in my particular situation, where you start kicking a ball around, you want to be that part of being in that environment, kicking a ball around and effectively getting people to like you because of your skills, effectively, that you have, and then it's your popularity. And I can remember playing in the streets as a kid, and I've got quite a fierce left foot, which is very, very sort of uncommon. For most footballers these days, you're either right-footed or you're built like a defender, and you'll stop things, hit like a brick wall. But I can remember playing in the street, playing Wally, playing Kirby.
Yeah.
Even smashing. I shouldn't even admit this in case my mum and dad or the neighbour in question is listening. But I even remember smashing someone's window and running like mad because I was going to get told off and grounded for a month or something like that. But I was just drawn to the fact of I follow, again, shouldn't admit this live now, but I follow Man United. They're my team, and I guess that besides from Stockport, of course, because that's my home team, you have this sort of visions of grandeur where you want to be the best in the world, and we all read the magazines at the time with Shoot and things like that, and Match magazines and even the Panini stickers. We all have to collect the Panini stickers, and then
I've still got my Italian 90 World Cup sticker book filled. It's the only one filled.
There you go. But yeah, I was just drawn to football. My dad is a Wolves fan. There is actually two of them at least I know of. So I shouldn't say that now because I was back in the Premiership.
You're doing pretty well these days, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. But my dad was drawn to Wolves because they used to play in white.
Right.
And they were always on the TV because they were playing in Europe and playing like that. And he was drawn to the fact they were playing in white and then gold when they're in the UK type of thing. So I just decided to pick a team. At the time, United weren't doing ever so well. They were sort of a mediocre sort of cup team.
Yeah.
And just followed them throughout the sort of 70s and then late 80s, and then we started to become a little bit better and win things.
So
that was really my sort of journey into football.
Yeah, and it very much sounds like what got me into sport and football myself. That it all started out with just playing out on the street, and I still put down to this day that I was lucky that I grew up on a street where it was just filled with people outside playing things, different active, not even always sports, but as you were saying, like Kirby, these random games that you'd make up. And I'm a firm believer that all of those like really what I call fundamental fun games, they can be the building blocks to help you become better in sport, because you're developing all these basic hand-eye, foot-eye coordination, skills and habits, and obviously building on your fitness as well. And
it's funny you should say that because, again, just talking now in general, I recall days where it was chucking it down with rain, and so you couldn't physically play on the grass. You couldn't really play in the street because it was raining. And I remember going to one of my very early school friends, and we used to play. We used to play sit down soccer in his living room.
Yeah.
With literally about 5 or 6 socks all rolled up into a ball.
Yeah.
And that's what we did, and we loved it.
Yeah.
It was good.
So when did your career at Stockport County actually begin then, Nick?
It was 86.
Yeah.
I'm really, I'm showing my age then. I was 16 at the time. And I mean, there's one thing that, no matter what anybody says, no one can ever take away your memories. And, the memories I'm still involved with the club now. I'm as a disability liaison officer. I absolutely love it. And, going back to the days when they're playing, admittedly, it was the reserves, and sometimes I'd been known as the official Stockport County hot water bottle. And people, what's that? What's all that? And that's because I kept the bench warm. But yeah, I mean, it's just the camaraderie you meet with your teammates as well. I mean, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago when I bumped into an old teammate, and I said, "Do you remember the time that we used to like finish training, get showered, and you're ready to leave the change rooms?" And at Stockport County, they've got a really, really long corridor,
right?
And we used to, particularly a lot of times it was picked on me, but you pick your bag up and you're walking down the corridor and you're about to go out of the player's door, and all of a sudden this particular fullback, Lee Broomhead he was called, and you go, "Oh, Clarky," and you go trundling all the way back, and "Yes, Lee," and he go, "See ya," and it's just literally getting you going back all the way back to the change room just to say see you. Then you knew you'd been got. So
yeah.
But it was just a bit about he was probably one of my first memories of sort of that stage in my life, in my career.
Yeah.
he was someone that I really looked up to. He was a great, and he still is a great lad. We've kept in touch. So yeah, it was good stuff. And then goes the internet again.
Yeah. So, who was a particular idol, whether that's in football or in different sport? Who was a sporting hero who you kind of looked up to, who inspired you?
Straight away, from a Stockport point of view, my idol was Osher Williams. Right. Because he had absolutely amazing, and this might sound a bit sexist, but he had amazing thighs. Yeah. And it's like, wow, look at those muscles. And he was just a really, really decent player. And I used to go to county with my granddad and my dad on a Friday night, which it was always known as Friday night was county night. And so I'd say Osher Williams was one of my sort of idols from a Stockport point of view.
Yeah.
Going further afield, my absolute dream was Gordon Hill.
Yeah.
Who believe it or not, I'm in touch with now, and he's one of the patrons for my charity. So, yeah. Long story short, I met him in Ibiza when I was 7 years old.
Gosh.
And United were out there training, and some waiter told my dad that Man United team were at this certain hotel.
Yeah.
So we traipsed all the way to this hotel on a red hot day, and spoke to the receptionist. And he said, "Oh yeah, Mr. Hill," and it's something like the 8th floor. So again, dragged my mum and dad up and my sister. Like, come on. We knocked on the door.
Yeah.
And Gordon's wife, Claire, answered. I was going to see Gordon Hill. And I had a hat on and everything, Man United. And Claire just turned around and said, "Oh, I'm awfully sorry. He's out running. He'll be back shortly, but you're more than welcome to wait in the lobby for him," type of thing. So I was gutted. I was absolutely, really, really downbeat. I turned around and walking down the corridor and sort of tail between my legs type of thing. Yeah. The next minute, Gordon Hill appears, and I'm like, oh. Yeah. And it was one of those where you're like, when you see it when kids on the TV and stuff now, I was just shell shocked. I just didn't know what to say. He signed my hat, signed my T-shirt, and it was like, you've met your idol sort of thing. I was like, wow, yeah.
And just a big part of what I do with the mental performance coaching that I do is I use techniques that enable athletes to kind of tap into the performances of people who they want to role model their performances on. Would you say that either of those two players you've mentioned there, that you strive to, emulate how they played in any way? Would you try to, take some of their elements and bring it into your own in your own performance in any way?
In essence, yes, because particularly with Gordon Hill, because he played number 11 and he was a left winger.
Yeah,
and that's position I had. So that's what I always strive to be, a really good left winger.
Yeah.
But I know later on in sort of my playing days, that some of the managers would play me on the right wing, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do with my right foot. I can really just stand on it, type of thing. But it had its advantageous moments as well, because obviously you could call it in rather than, as I was sort of trained within football, a position of a winger, it's again changed now, but a position traditionally of the winger was to get the ball go onto your wing, go as far to the byline as possible, and cross it for the centre forward.
Yeah.
And hopefully you score.
Yeah.
I mean, these days you see it with wing backs and all sorts now. So they play, left back or right back, but they're expected to attack like mad. So it's all changed. But I think the most thing you've got to do from an athlete's point of view is be able to adapt.
Yeah, definitely. I must admit, I when I was younger, I was left-footed. I played left wing, and I didn't feel comfortable when they'd stick me on the other wing on the right wing. And a lot of it is that it's just you kind of like to stick with what you know, stick what's familiar. You've had success, doing what you do on that left-hand side, and it didn't always feel right to me. But as you say, being able to adapt, being flexible in any walk of life is a great habit and skill to have, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, especially with like the modern day life, the technology and everything else, you've just got to obviously the more intensity on maintaining your fitness as well. Yeah. So I mean, days gone past when I was playing, I mean, we wouldn't really concentrate on your dietaries and your foods and drinks and stuff like that. It was mainly if you had a drink for the game, it would either be water or Lucozade or something like that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's all proper high energy, shakes and all sorts for the rehab side of things. So and muscle tone, muscle recovery, and all the rest of it. So it's weird.
So I'd like to delve a little bit further in terms of you and your performance. Looking back on your time as as an athlete, as a footballer, do you feel that you achieved your potential? Did you maximize your ability as a footballer?
No. Nowhere. I mean, I even to the extent when I was in my school days, people, classmates, had the opportunities to play for people like Tottenham. They got scouted and they wanted this particular lad to go down to Tottenham to be part of the youth setup.
Yeah.
And he just said, it's not for me. I don't want to travel outside of Stockport, basically. So I'm not interested.
Yeah.
And we're like, are you joking? This is like a fantastic opportunity that people give the right arm for.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I mean, he was a great player as well. But he just wasn't interested. And the same goes for me. It got to the stage where I was sort of breaking into the things like that, but all your mates were going out drinking and meeting girls and going to clubs and things like that, and you're like, what should I do? And there's that sort of social pull to pull you away from the sort of football side, and we've seen it recently with some players that are better known in the world of football that things go to their heads and they end up doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So you just got to be careful.
Yeah, it's such a fine balance, trying to be an elite athlete, because like in all walks of life, everybody has to make sacrifices to some degree, don't you? Whether you're a sportsman or woman or you're in any other career or discipline, there are sacrifices to be made, but there are big sacrifices socially, that you just have to make.
You do. I mean, if you want to be particularly good or even effectively the best in that sort of field, then you've got to put some serious dedication in.
And this is something that I've seen time and time again with the athletes that I've worked with, and they get that pull. There's a pull between, one hand, going for it and being this athlete that they want to be, but also living a life at the same time. And and certainly that's with a lot of the research that I've done over the years is these top athletes, these athletes who really achieve excellence, they are prepared to sacrifice those things. I have some key fundamentals that from the work that I've done, which I feel are really crucial, keys to excellence, if you like. And one of them is the habits that they have, and the things that they were willing to sacrifice and persist with over time to just really work on their craft.
Yeah, I mean, again, to give you an example, you've got the likes of George Best. He was an incredibly talented footballer, and a bit of a ladies' man. Well, probably a lot of a ladies' man, but he also he also loved a drink, and in one respect, it's where the statistics don't add up, because how can a footballer like that, with all that skill, go out and get bladdered and then turn up and it doesn't? You've got an athlete. You should have an athlete's body and all that, and yet he sort of defied the answers or the logic of trying to sort of prepare him, what have you. Whereas you've got other players that are nowhere near as skillful, but they ensure that they, sleep for 8-9 hours a day, or at night time, obviously, and eat properly and train regularly, and yet they don't cut the mustard. So
no, you're right. Sometimes, you do have that. Sometimes it does boil down to the physical, that sometimes they haven't developed the technical ability, the tactical understanding. Sometimes it is that, isn't it? Definitely. I think with George Best, though, in the end, his poor habits, they caught up with him, though, didn't they? If you look back to when his prime was, very early on in his career. He left United relatively young, and then he obviously, I think he went over to Preston in the end, didn't he? Was it Preston or something like that? And then there was, playing football in America. In the end, his drinking, his partying, I do think, got in the way of him really cementing, a real legacy for himself.
Well, again, at that sort of age, and the likes of George Best, who was sort of attracting the media type of spotlight around the footballer, and Rodney Marsh was another one where it sort of effectively was the bright lights of Hollywood that probably pulled them away, and they went over to the States, where at the time they probably weren't paying as much money as the glory clubs like United and stuff, but there was that pull to be in the States and set something new up, and it's obviously evolved a lot since then, but even you've got the likes of David Beckham now with his own side in America. So
So, in your opinion, in terms of becoming and being and staying there at the top in sport, and let's in your case look at football, what percentage would you say, in your opinion, is determined by your kind of mental ability, and what percentage do you think it's physical? If you could put a percentage on it, where would it lie for you in this respect?
I think from my own personal perspective, a lot of it was sort of the performance would be sort of like probably 70%, and probably 30% would be made up of mental and
Yeah.
just, sort of the fitness regime and type of things like that. But I think it's changed. I think it's changed massively now, where it's I'd probably say it's somewhere around the other way around now. It's 70-30 in the other favour.
Yeah.
Because you've got to be sort of you've got to be switched on. You've got to be aware of what's around you. You've got to be aware that the people that your circles you're mixing with, and yeah, I mean, you just literally got to look after yourself. And I mean, I don't want to jump the boat on what you're going to ask me, but it's like my own perspective changed massively. Well, 9 years ago, so it was just like one of those things where you think, well, okay, let's put it in perspective now. What really does matter?
Yeah.
As you were growing up and as a kid, you'll want to be on nice holidays and drive around in nice cars, have nice watches, and all the rest of it. But when something like what happened to me happened, then it's like, whoa, hang on a minute. What really matters is that I'm here. So
yeah, definitely. And we're certainly going to delve into that and touch on what you're referring to there a little further down the line. So certainly you're saying from your own perspective, when you was playing, you felt that 30% of your performance was determined by the mental side and 70% physical. So in your time, then, if 30% of your performances was determined by the mental processes, how you're thinking, how you're feeling, the habits, the behaviors that you've got, did you, at your club, was there any kind of incentive? Was there any training with it? Were there any, things that you did as a team that your coaches were doing to help, develop your skills mentally? Because if the way with the work that I do, I'm a believer that, if it is 70-30, then, 70% of your time should be spent working on the physical. But then if we're saying 30% is mental, then how much time, are athletes giving to the mental side of it? If people are saying that it's this percentage and that percentage. So just curious as to know if there was anything that you felt looking back that as a club, did you do anything to help help you in that respect?
I don't think so. Not really. If I'm being honest, it was more about your camaraderie and making sure you fitted in with your teammates.
Yeah.
And you sort of well respected and liked.
Yeah.
And even going to the extreme of playing sort of picture football, on a local park, you always wanted to make sure you fitted in. So there was there's an element there with the mentality that, if such and such went out on a Friday night, but didn't get in until 4 o'clock in the morning, but still turned up at Saturday for a dinner time kickoff, and played out of his skin. All right, he stunk of booze or whatever, but he still played out of his skin. So then I'm going to do that because it worked for him, so it'll work for me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always have that sort of pull. And I think, especially in this day and age, I think you've got to have a good mix of both the sort of performance preparation, looking after your body and your dietary and stuff. I wish I could tell you a bit more because I've got relatives that are actually at Manchester United. Granted, it's a ladies' team.
Yeah.
And her brother is at Newcastle United. He's a goalkeeper. And, one of the things that, and again, I don't want to steal your thunder, but they have family dues and what have you, and you talk to them, happens, just stay grounded because you've seen the latest footballers, where the likes of Ronaldo and Beckham and Marcus Rashford and everything can be turned on a coin.
Yeah.
And so going back to what was day granted, because it could all be gone tomorrow.
Yeah. So, do you think that? And I know you have kind of mentioned this really. So, do you think that mental performance and sports psychology? Do you think that it has a part to play in helping footballers play better? Do you think that this is something that footballers should be, as individuals and as clubs should be dedicating more time towards, working on and developing?
Yes, in short. Again, you just everything that's gone on. I mean, it's you think of players in the past of people like Lee Sharp for United, for instance, Ryan Giggs, Russell Beardsmore, class of '92. Some of those players were absolutely unbelievable. But what went wrong with things like Russell Beardsmore springs to mind, because he was sensational, but he never really progressed past that sort of level.
Yeah.
But he could have, potentially he could have gone on playing for England for a few years.
Yeah.
Come and all the rest of it. But I think you've got a duty of care to look after your players as well. Because I mean, not only are you their employer, but you're also got to look after, effectively, they're an asset. So you've got to look after that asset.
Definitely. And I think with the work that I do, this is something that I'm quite passionate about, really, that I don't think children, especially, who are released from clubs or released from sports programs, are they getting the help that they need when they're told that, unfortunately, you're not going to be progressing any further. Are clubs and sports helping athletes enough mentally and emotionally when they are part of their teams and performance programs, and also afterwards we do, we're hearing more and more stories all the time about how athletes are struggling after they finish playing, and largely because they've invested their identity, their purpose in life. Two big drivers psychologically is who you think you are as a person and what your values are in life. And in order to become a great athlete, you'll hear people say, I am a footballer, I am an Olympian. That is telling you something very powerful about who they think that they are. And then as a result of that, their values, their whole life is driven around that. What they're doing day to day, weekly, is about becoming a better athlete. And then when that gets taken away, who and what are they left with then? When you're not an athlete, who do they say then? What is the I am then? And I think that's a real challenge in sport, I think.
I think you're spot on. I mean, it's we see it. I see it at Stockport now, where even the old boys come back and they do the sort of the corporate days, and they do questions and answer sessions of like what it was like to play and such and such. But if the player doesn't make it, it opens a whole can of worms, because why didn't they make it? You've got to ask yourself a question: is there a mental issue? Is there a mental health issue?
Yeah.
Does it play on the brain? In days of me playing, it was always one of those where, what do you want to be? I want to be a professional footballer. And people say, what do you want to be a professional footballer for? Because it's a short-term career.
Yeah.
at best, you'll probably get about 8 to 10 years at it.
Yeah.
If you look really lucky, but
Yeah.
you know, most players just sort of lasted sort of three or 4 seasons, and it was time to move on to somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I think you, as a club, I think you've got to have that duty of care to look after them, even after long gone. You know, they've gone doing his painting and decorating or whatever he's doing, but just try and show them that you're there for them to support for them.
Yeah,
you know.
I agree, and this is something that a lot of the work that I do with the mental performance, I'd say about 80% of it is with the younger elite athletes, you know, the under 16s, under 18s, and you know, one of the things that certainly comes back from the clients that I have is from the parents is that you know, they've been to all these academies. I remember one parent saying, you know, my son's been at Man City, he's been at Blackburn, he's been at Oldham, and there was another club I can't remember, and he said they're simply not being taught these skills that you were teaching my son. That there's nobody in there teaching them these things about how to handle anxiety, how to handle nerves, you know, how to handle, you know, the situations where your confidence goes or motivation isn't there. And you know, if someone's, you know, there at Man City and they're not putting the time into helping people and footballers develop these mental skills, then if they're not, then the odds are, you know, they're not giving enough time to this in lots of different clubs as well, which I think is a big issue.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you mentioned Man City. They're probably one of the richest clubs in the world now. But City always strive to follow United, and now I think it's the other way around. I think United have got a lot to learn, a lot of catching up.
Yeah.
And you go, all right, we're talking about the Premiership and top elite performers, but it also happens at, you know, your lower level grassroots clubs like.
Yeah,
I mean, even lower than Stockport County, and you know, people like Tiglis Nomads, Bramall, and you know, I think I think the club has got that duty of care that they've got to look after the players.
Yeah, definitely. Just going back to when you were playing, then, what was most important to you about playing football? What was most important to you? What were the reasons behind, you know, why you were doing it?
Mainly just to put in a good performance, and I mean, I wasn't too bad with the odd goals either. But even to the extent of taking a corner or, you know, having a throw in, making sure that you didn't do a foul throw, and you know, just silly little things like that, because you didn't want to let your teammates down.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember once I played for Bury. Well, I was a trialist. We played Bury reserves, Bury that have gone out of business and are slowly coming back. At Gig Lane, and we played their reserve side, and we were just a bunch of lads that had been put together as trialists, and we ended up beating their reserve side 9-6.
Gosh.
I scored 3, and the centre forward scored 6.
Yeah.
And I set the 6 up for him, as well as obviously scoring my 3.
Yeah.
And it was like, when we're getting changed after the game, you know, people were calling aside and like, right, want to make sure I've got your name right, your telephone number, your address, we'll be in touch.
Yeah.
And then it's that. It never happened. I've still not had the letter. So
really,
God knows when. Yes, but it's one of those things where, you know, in one way that could have really, really affected me in respect when it goes back to being the mental health side of things, you then say, I think to yourself, well, if I'd just done a little bit more, would they have rang me up or would they have wrote to me? So yeah, I think clubs in general have I know I keep saying it, that duty of care to really look after the player.
Yeah. Let's just fast forward a little bit then, because I know you certainly were faced with some, big challenges outside of your footballing career and footballing days. Could you just expand on this a little more and just talk to us and about, kind of what happened and how this affected you?
Yeah. Basically, after obviously my footballing days were sort of over, you have to do things to pay for the mortgage and all the rest of it. And I ended up being in sort of telecoms and property. And I had quite a successful career on that side of things where I could allude to like a movie star wages again, where I get paid a vast amount of money and work hard for it. But then I got made redundant, which again can mentally affect you, especially when you've got a mortgage to pay and at the time 2 young children. So you do anything you can to sort of pay your way. And I, at the time, was working as a director of operations for an internet company over in Nottingham. And the owner of the business was constantly in another country, which meant me being like the number 2. Effectively, I would be the person in sort of control of everything. And on the 10th of September 2012, I collapsed in the bathroom. Was perfectly fine, normal the day before. Collapsed in the bathroom, and next thing you know, my wife rang me, took me to the local hospital where they announced that I'd had a severe stroke. And it transpired that I had a large bleed on the left-hand side of my brain there.
Gosh.
Which was a massive shock because, us footballers never even knew we had a brain. So it was meant to be a bit of humour there. So yeah, and so I was 4 weeks in the hospital and came out and I found out there was very little help and support and information out there. So I grabbed the bull by the horns after a conversation with an old work colleague, and he said, "Nick, I've put you some web space aside." And I was like, "What?" He said, "Well, tell people about what's happened."
Yeah.
I was like, I haven't got a clue where to start. And he told me the basics of with what have you. And next minute, I got this sort of massive website that I could do whatever I wanted with. And it just sort of went on from there, because there was people sort of coming up to say, how does it feel and all the rest of it. So I just sort of said, do you know what, I'm going to make this a charity. I'm going to help other people that have been impacted by stroke. And I have done that. I created and founded Stroke Information as a charity. We got a charity status in 2016. So it's like 4 years after my own stroke, we got charity status.
Wow.
And the plan is to try and get people who've had strokes back into work.
Yeah.
But also, you get misconception about strokes that they just happen to elderly people.
Yeah.
And I, for one, was of that sort of ilk, because I thought that people just in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s would have strokes. But no, I mean, I've known now that even unborn babies can have strokes, and you think, wow. Last year, we got introduced to a young, a lady first, who hadn't had a stroke herself, but her son had 3 strokes. And just talking to her, she said, yeah, well, Sebastian's only 5. And I'm like, what? You know, it makes you just realise that. And to a certain extent, it comes back with regarding this, because you're not telling me that somebody who's 5 is potentially obese, they're drinking, you've got the wrong diet. There's obviously something wrong that has caused that stroke. So, I'm all for the fact of the diet and exercise, but there's an element of where there's little hidden things like not so much the stress, but the anxiety that might play on somebody's mind that then will cause that particularly. So we're trying to get people back into work that have had strokes. If people are of a certain age that they don't need to work, then we try and sort of say, well, we want you to be part of this because you're one of us, type of thing.
Great.
You know, you've still got a purpose in life, although you might think your life is sort of over from that point of view.
Yeah,
you've still got very much a purpose, and we're not doing too bad so far. We've got quite a few people back into work, so
fantastic.
You know, all good stuff. Yeah,
that's great to hear. And you know, you've obviously put in an incredible amount of work to get your charity and where it is, and get, you know, get this, you know, noticed, you know, because as you say, until I was reading about yourself and listening to what you're saying there, I only associated, you know, strokes with elderly age people. It happened to my gran, you know, when she was in I think she very late 70s, early 80s, and my dad 5 years ago, although he didn't have a stroke, it's kind of a similar type of brain-related issue. He started having really bad, all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, his behavior just changed massively to the point where he was, you know, really struggling with severe kind of psychosis, really. And to fast forward a few years down the line, in the end, they diagnosed him with having encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain, and in particular the hippocampus, and essentially the encephalitis is a virus which actually eats the neurons and various areas of the brain. So it's almost, there's some similarities between a stroke and that, and you know he's only ever deteriorated from there, really. But again, I did associate, you know, the strokes, that sort of thing, to, you know, age, you know, and being older, and as you're saying, you know, when things are happening to young children, you know, what's the root cause there, and with all the work that I do with psychology and things like this, I'm a big believer that, you know, something causes something. You know, things very rarely tend to just happen, you know, to the body, you know, for the reason. And I think you was kind of touching on it yourself there. And I was just curious to know is if you think yourself, when it happened to you, could the mental, emotional stress that perhaps, you know, was going on with work and things like that, could that have contributed to it, do you feel?
Without doubt. I mean, although I don't think some of the medics will ever tell you, but stress was a massive factor. And, you know, the way that I understand stress now is such more of a silent killer because people do get worked up over.
Yeah.
I mean,
100%.
Since my stroke, I don't get stressed. I just do not, because one of the reasons the charity has grown the way it grew is the fact that if things were getting a little bit sort of heated, whatever I was doing, watching telly, or even if we have family members round, and there used to be like 3 or 4 conversations going on, and I couldn't cope.
Yeah,
I would literally just come away and come upstairs and listen to some music or whatever. Just get in my own zone, and I think a lot with the mental health stigma and stuff like that. It is okay to not be okay, to coin the phrase off telly. To a certain extent, the main thing that we try and get across from a charity's point of view is no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Just reach out and talk to us, and if we can help you, we'll help you. Simple as that.
I mean, as well as the sports psychology and the mental performance work I do with athletes, I also do, kind of offer my skills with just people generally, trying to help them, because I'm a qualified hypnotherapist. And so when you're talking about stress, a huge, in a nutshell, a lot of the work that you're doing with hypnotherapy and hypnosis and things like this is just teaching people how to relax. People, and when I do a hypnotherapy, session with somebody, the very first thing technique that I'll do with somebody is just literally teach them how to relax. And once they've felt what real relaxation is, they then realize, God, I've been seriously stressed. And I've been seriously stressed for a long, long, long time. And that's part of the problem, that in today's society, people, have got used to living with stress as if that's the norm. And it's not. It's not the norm. Yeah. And people really need to become aware of this. And as you say, how stress can be a silent killer, because we have something called, the elastic load, which is our bodies, we humans, we've evolved from millions of years of stress, but it's small incremental amounts of stress. Just like when you go to the gym, if you were going to the gym and you start pounding those heavy weights from day one, you're gonna tear a tendon or a muscle. Yeah. But when you gradually increase the stress, you gradually increase the weights that you're lifting over time, the body can handle that. Yeah. But just like going to the gym, you need to have days off, a rest from the stress. And today's world, it's just an ongoing recycling of stress, of fear, of anxiety, and often people, they don't even know that it's there. They don't feel right, but they don't know what it is. And so I've worked with a fair few people, helping them in this respect, just to start getting used to relaxing the mind, because when the mind relaxes, the body relaxes. The two are inseparable. You can't have one without the other. So if you're thinking stressful thoughts, you are feeling stressful feelings in your body.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, I in my working life, I used to do a lot of traveling, and even though you might think you're one of the best drivers on the road, subconsciously you're also then stressed if there's a bit of traffic. You're meant to be at a certain place at a certain time, and you're not going to make it, and effectively you could have losing that particular job or whatever you're doing. Subconsciously, it's playing on your mind, and all right, I don't do anywhere near the amount of driving that I used to do, but I can see why people get heads up and, get anxious and angry with other road users and things like that. But
Yeah.
I touched on it previously that, even growing up as a kid and you get into the early adult years and all the rest of it, you all want to have the nicest clothes, nice holidays, drive a nice car, have a nice watch, have a nice latest TV, the latest computer. Ultimately, all that really matters is that you're still alive.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to add a little bit onto that, especially seeing my dad how he is now. He's in a very bad way. He can't dress himself. He can't even eat his own food anymore. He can't. He can't even. Yesterday I was around seeing him, and he can't even bring a drink to his mouth, and it's that fine line. We want to be able to live the best life that we can live. It's not just about surviving. For me, and the work that I do with largely people in sport, it's about enjoying it. We're not here to just go through the motions. Just like playing football or any sport, you play at your best when you're enjoying life. You're not just turning up to do it, like with your job and generally, we have to find a way as a society of enjoying what we're doing, in the most basic way, because if we're waking up every day just to survive, it's not enough. Not enough. Yeah. And I'd imagine that you taking on what you've taken on with your charity and things like this, I'd imagine it's giving you an energized sense of purpose, a real deeper meaning to get up each day and go, I'd imagine you saying something like, I'm not getting up today just for myself. I'm getting up for my family, my children, but I'm also trying to get up now and help people. And when you can, expand your mind, your values, when they go outside of yourself, that's when that's where the real power is in life, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree, 100%. It's when you can make a difference to someone's life, then that really, to me, is being success in what you're doing. Because if you can really show somebody, let's go back to like when I first started volunteering on the stroke ward. I remember an occupational therapist turning around. We're having a game of hangman, simple game of hangman using a whiteboard, and we're going around the patients saying, right, we'll pick a letter. And it got to this particular guy who will remain nameless. And we're playing hangman, and the occupational therapist turned around and said, don't worry about him. He'll not talk again. And I was like, what? How can you say that when, unless you show me a particular part of my brain that's broken, what right have you got to say that he'll not talk again?
Yeah.
And again, part of my sort of character, I'm a bit of a practical joker. So I started doing this as I was like sending him a telepathic message.
Yeah.
And it got to the bit where it's a bit of encouragement, and I'm going, come on, Mr. Such and Such.
Yeah.
Think of something. And I was like willing him to, and all of a sudden he just turned around and he went, lamb hot pot.
Gosh.
And I was like, what? And it almost brought me to tears, because I felt like I wouldn't do it because you got the camera, so you'll see me doing it. But I felt like sticking the proverbial twos up at the therapist, going, there you go, I told you.
Yeah.
But it's and I guess you've got to be in their position, and you've lived their life or walked in their shoes to really understand what someone's going through.
Yeah, definitely. And with modern science and neuroscience now, for that, was it a doctor that said that they won't talk again?
No, it was an occupational therapist.
Yeah. So
I've seen it. I've seen it with doctors as well,
yeah.
and I understand that they go off, what's in the medicine books and all the rest of it, and what they've studied. But the human body and the brain is so complex that
100%.
nobody really knows unless they've been through that sort of thing themselves. So,
I mean, I've read, we're over 25 years researching the brain and the mind. I've come across some unbelievable, stories, and I've seen great things myself. There are countless books out there written by doctors, scientists who see things, a little bit differently, than the traditional medical paradigm. And one thing is for sure is that what used to be thought 20 years ago about the brain, that, they used to say it's fixed, once you got past a certain age, the early 20s, that's the brain that you got there is the brain that you've got, and for the rest of your life. And that has just been, it's been disproved in the last 15 years. The brain is neuroplastic, which means that it can continually keep being molded like a piece of plasticine right up until the day that you die. And it's often, from things that I've been reading in books, often doctors and people in the medical profession, often it's their own limiting beliefs and their own lack of knowledge about certain things that is part of the problem, because they then impose their belief on, the patient. And if it comes from a doctor, if it comes from a person who's in a position of authority, then people accept it. And there's countless stories of where people have lost, have had an accident with the brain, and and a region of the brain has been damaged, and won't and doesn't repair. But what they've found is that the brain is that clever, it can assign that same role that it used to do in one region of the brain to another, and they can get that skill, that ability back, even if it's, if that skill is just talking, they can get it back. The brain can shift, away, that role from one region of the mind to another. But not all doctors, not all people working in these industries are privy to some of the latest, information out there.
Yeah, I mean, I again won't mention names, but I remember recently being to a local care home and seeing this guy who'd had a stroke, and he had like a family meeting, and the guy who had the stroke hadn't really fully understood what was going on. And later on of that day, the physiotherapist that was actually at the meeting rang me up and introduced herself again and said, we met earlier, blah, 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 blah. The problem is, she said, we think that patient A has plateaued. So I was like, what? He's reached all he's going to get. He's not going to get any better.
Yeah.
I'm like, again, how dare you?
Yeah.
I know people that have been locked in after their stroke and they've come out of it.
Yeah, gosh.
So don't tell me that.
Don't dare tell me that. Yeah.
No.
As I say, really delving into the world of the brain and hypnosis and hypnotherapy and what the techniques and skills you can do with it, it's blown my mind over the years. It really has. Just a simple thing. Some of the things that I've helped athletes with is pain. Now, most people think that the only way to turn pain off is to take a pill. Well, how is it that I can help somebody turn off pain like that through using some of my techniques? Some of it I use with hypnosis, some of it I use with my own techniques called neuroscience techniques, and I can help and do help athletes to, get rid of it in 10 minutes. So what's going on there? And essentially, somebody doesn't need to use my techniques to be able to turn off pain. You can do it yourself when you know how to do it. Because pain, people think if I cut my finger, people think, because they've cut the finger, people think that the pain is in the hand. The pain isn't in the hand; it's experienced in the brain. So, in order to stop pain, you have to. It's in the mind. It's in the brain where you solve that. And the simple examples like where perhaps, I don't know, you can remember a time yourself where you cut your leg or something like that, gardening or something, and you look down and your leg's been bleeding for 5-10 minutes and you had no idea. And then you don't pain until you look down and see it bleeding. So what's happened there? And it's all to do with what's going on in the brain. And people have to become more understanding that if you give people the belief, that's a huge part of it. And I spent a lot of the last 15 years looking into the placebo effect, which is essentially belief. When you have the belief to do anything, you're going to give yourself a huge chance of achieving that. And if a doctor, if a nurse, if an occupational therapist doesn't have that belief in you, in your weakest moment, then you'll accept it. Yeah,
totally with you on that.
So just touching on, linking the kind of two worlds, then your former sports world with the, where you're kind of at now with your charity work and your life. Do you believe that your career, your experiences in sport, have they helped you? Did they help you with your recovery from your stroke? Do you believe that they've helped you in pursuing what you've pursued with your charity and the work that you're doing now?
I certainly hope so. I mean, again, the sort of, even being as a football player, I was tenacious. One in the respect that you'd never give up.
Yeah.
If the team you were playing against scored 2, you would do your damnedest to make sure you scored at least 3 or 4, just to make sure. I mean, it's the old cliche where there's certain football teams that, don't mind conceding goals because they know that they'll go and score 3 or 4 more than the other team. So I think that sort of stayed with me throughout my life, and certainly after the stroke. People, again, wrongly, tend to give up on people. No matter, I mean, I can only just relate to the stroke side of things, but whatever that person's going through, whether it be alcoholism, whether it's smoking or whatever, they'll just effectively give up on that person.
Yeah.
And what we are saying, and as a charity, is not to really give up and effectively give them hope, but not false hope, proper, real hope that they can, achieve something. It's like you say, if you actually believe in something and you're really determined to do it, you will do it.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, as I say, I've read countless books, from written by doctors who, when they've started to experience things either themselves or they've witnessed things through patients, there are things called spontaneous remissions where people have been told medically that, your time is done in whatever capacity, and then they've recovered and they don't know how they've recovered. So what's happening there? And there's people that have studied that. What is different about these people who are told that you've got this incurable disease, and some of them die, and some of them don't. What is going on there different? There's something is happening, and there are books out there written about this, and one of them which touched on it is a great book that I would advise anybody, yourself or any people within your charity that you're working with, to read. It's called "You Are the Placebo,"
right?
And it's all about the power of belief. And the beginning of the book, he touches on how the placebo effect was actually uncovered, and it's a really interesting story. During World War II, a doctor was out in the fields treating soldiers who'd had their legs and arms blown off, and it was a known fact that if somebody did get badly injured, the medical doctor would come, and the first thing they do is they inject them with morphine to numb the pain.
Yeah.
And this doctor, on this particular day, it'd obviously been a really bad day in terms of casualties and things. He ran out of morphine, and what he didn't want his patients, the soldiers, to do is to go into shock if they thought there was no morphine left, because the morphine was going to give them the belief that at least I'm out of pain. So this doctor turns around to his nurse and said, the nurse said to the doctor first, we've ran out. And then he kind of took her to one side and said, right, you do not let on here that we've run out. You're going to fill this bottle of morphine with water, and then you're going to pass it to me, and you're going to say the exact same things that you normally would do. You're just going to pass it to me. I'll put the syringe in, pull it out, and I'm going to stick it in. And he did that, and he did it on the first person. He injected them with water, and basically sawed off the end of this soldier's leg, and he felt no pain. And he was like, what the hell is happening here? And then he did it again and again and again and again. And he was, all he had that day was water, and soldiers were being completely numb in that area. And he repeated that countless times whilst he was out there during World War II. And he said to himself, says, as long as I get out of this war myself, when I do get back home, I'm going to spend the rest of my career uncovering what is happening here, because I don't understand it. And it's, I wish I could remember the doctor's name, but it's all in this book. And essentially the placebo and placebo trials that you hear about, when medical trials are being used to approve a drug, they have to follow this placebo procedure, all because of this guy, and all because those soldiers believed that they was getting a painkiller. Their mind and body then manufactured it. Yeah. And that is the power of belief. It you a long, long, long way, and vice versa. Without it, it can be so destructive. And I think there was something else that you touched on there. You mentioned how you're giving the people in your charity hope. I think the thing that needs to happen, which is certainly what I'm trying to do in the world of sport and a little bit outside of the sports world, is it needs to go beyond belief and hope, and actually start giving people tools and techniques and strategies. Right, I believe I'm going to get better. I believe I can recover. Right, how am I going to do it? What things can I actually do to aid my progress, to improve my health, to help ease anxiety? These things. What are the actual tools that are out there that I can use, that I can combine with hope and practical and mental tools that'll really give me the best chance to become the best athlete that can be, or B, recover from an illness, or C, even just live the best life that I want to live.
Yeah, totally with you on that, 100%.
So I want to be respectful of your time here, Nick. So I'm just going to finish with the last couple of last few questions. One of the things that I like to ask the athletes who come on the show is, and I think I've got a feeling what your answer might be on this one, because you mentioned something a few minutes ago. What was your superpower as an athlete? And by superpower, I mean maybe just one thing that you had or did, whether that be a skill or whether that be like a mentality, whether that be something technical or whether it be to do with a habit that you had. What was maybe one thing that you did as a footballer, or whether, as I said, whether it be physically or mentally, that helps you get to where you got to?
I think that the fact that I had an amazing, and I say it myself, an amazing left foot.
Yeah.
I just effectively knew that I had some kind of special tool that, if it had worked, I could make sure that I would play the nice ball through to whoever to go and score. But I think that from a tool point of view, plus, if I'm being completely honest, and looking back at with the former teammate Lee, because it made me want to sort of encourage maybe players that weren't as good, and encourage them to come out. And I mean, I remember another particular point where we were training, and the statement was said to me that, "Oh, make sure that you speak a lot." I'm like, what? Make sure you shout a lot, even if you don't want the ball. Shout, make your presence known, and it that kind of thing's really stuck with me as well. That nobody wants a timid footballer that is not prepared to stick his hand up and say, "Pass me the ball."
Yeah.
So I, even to a certain extent, when I was past my sort of proper playing days and played amateur football, again, it was all about having a bit of a laugh and a joke with the referee, and saying things like, "Oh, it's handball, ref." Yeah, it's not handball. You only use one hand. That type of thing. That you've just got to have that rapport and that sort of. I think just trying to make a bit of a difference again, even to a point of being in the team to make a difference. So
yeah, great. And a couple of things then. So, what's your most either enjoyable or defining sports football memory that you have as a player? What's the one memory, one occasion which really stands out for you, where things really went well for you, or a particular defining moment in your footballing days where something different happened that day, or you did something differently, or something like this?
I think, without doubt, one of the most enjoyable, defining moments was playing at Old Trafford.
Yeah,
playing at Old Trafford, and I mean, even now I relate to it a bit with my awareness talks that I do. To anybody else looking in now, I would just look like a normal person, whatever normal is. But I say, I'm Nick, I had a stroke, blah, 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 ex-football, played at Old Trafford. They go, "You've played at Old Trafford?" And you go, "Yeah, I've played at Old Trafford in front of 73,000. And they go, "Wow." And I go, "Not people, just seats." And it's that comedy that then effectively it puts them down at that level, so that they know that you can effectively talk to someone.
Yeah.
And it goes back to my earlier comment about my relatives. Was saying to them to stay grounded.
Yeah.
In the pictures, one of the things I like to do is to tell people about the best pitch I ever played on.
Yeah.
Because most people think, "Oh yeah, you played at Old Trafford, it must have been like a carpet to play on."
Yeah.
Well, actually, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible to play on. It was just full of divots.
Yeah.
And so they kind of changed that conversation to say, okay, what's the best pitch you ever played on? And believe it or not, it's actually Morecambe's.
Really? Gosh.
Because it was so flat. I mean,
Yeah.
not only because of it being near the seaside, it was so flat. It was lovely to play on.
Great.
But yeah, it's just there's that. When I played at Old Trafford, I even took a penalty at the Stretford end, which again was unbelievable experience. Is this going to be recorded as well? Because I didn't score, but don't tell anybody. No. And again, I played at Craven Cottage down in Fulham.
Yeah.
It was for an inter-company tournament, like a charity day thing. And believe it or not, somebody else who lives on my road was playing for a different team, but in the same tournament.
Gosh.
And he went, bloody hell. He said, how have you managed to get here? I said, well, I've told the missus I'm going to B&Q. And he went, what? And she believes you? I went, well, yeah, I've not told her which B&Q I'm going to. And it's just those little things like that you know, again, you make people realise that you've got a potential sense of humour and you know, just a normal person. And
yeah, I mean, again, you know, I've done a lot of research myself into the power of laughter. You know, laughter is one of the best cures. You know, I have a lot of skills and techniques to help people with their mental, emotional, and even physical health. And but many of these tools that I have, people actually have these resources themselves. They've just got to tap into them. You know, we can all laugh. We can all see the funny side of life, and then sometimes we as people, you know, we allow, you know, the events to control us, and we stop seeing, you know, the basic fundamentals and the joyful, fun elements of life. And laughter is such a powerful tool, because a lot of what I try to do with the athletes that I work with is I'm trying to help them, if they're stuck in a rut, you know, essentially what's happened is that they've got into a negative state of mind, and that state could last for 10 minutes, it could last for an hour, it could last for a day, a week, it could last for a month. And if it prolongs, you know, essentially when somebody stays in a negative state, ultimately that's what turns into depression when it persists over time. You know, you could have anxiety for a day, but then if it keeps coming and going and going and going, and you, in the end, after weeks and months of anxiety or low mood, you forget what even started it, and that's what turns into depression. But being able to change your state, whether you're an athlete or, you know, your average Joe person, is crucial. You know, and laughter is one way of changing your state. It will knock you out of it. You know, you can't be happy and sad at the same time. Yeah. And, you know, again, it's another book that I've read, but I can't remember the doctor's name. But it was an actual doctor who had been doing some research on laughter himself, and it got diagnosed with quite a severe disease. I can't remember what it was, and he decided that he was going to try and cure himself through laughter. And he went and booked himself into a hotel for a week and took with him every comedy, DVD, film, you know, stand-up show, anything that he could find that was going to make him laugh. And he locked himself in this hotel for a week and just watched things that made him laugh. And the nuts and bolts of the story is that he survived this illness that he wasn't supposed to survive, and he certainly puts a big part of it down to being able to just break himself out of this kind of state that he was in, and kind of flicking him in his mind to looking at life in in a more positive way with those rose-tinted glasses, if you like.
Yeah.
So I certainly, agree with you there about the, the power of laughter.
Comedy is the best medicine. Medicine is out there. So totally agree with that.
Last two questions then, Nick. What three pieces of advice would you give a young up-and-coming athlete today who could perhaps learn from the things that you learn in your career?
Definitely stay grounded.
Yeah.
To sort of keep it real. And don't be afraid to ask questions as well. And if you need support, ask for support.
Yeah.
There's no shame in asking for support. I mean, even if it's from a footballing point of view, talking to your manager, your coach, say, I can do some little tips on how to improve this part of my game or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think those are the sort of three main things there: is to stay grounded, keep it real, and not being afraid to ask.
Brilliant. And the last question, which I ask everyone, is: what's your definition or meaning of achieving sporting excellence?
To be the best you can be.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Without trying to be corny or cliche, if you aspire to, for argument's sake, play for England, and you play for England, even at tiddlywinks, then you're the best that you're gonna be. So just really relate to that, and if you can achieve that, then great.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks a lot, Nick.
All right.
I really appreciate you, giving up your time here today. It's been really, empowering listening to, how your life has progressed through football and obviously then kind of how your life, was flipped on its head after your playing career and listening to how you've turned adversity into something like pretty powerful and something very meaningful, which I'm sure has brought a new lease of life. Probably from something that that occurred, which was pretty dire anyway, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously not forget it. I don't forget it like it was yesterday, but I can remember being on the crash trolley at the hospital, and the paramedics said to my wife and my parents, you need to prepare yourself for the worst. He's in a bad way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And effectively, it's sort of it's made me realise, and it's made me appreciate things that you have got. And even now in my current role as Disability Liaison Officer at County, I just try and make everybody's enjoyment of the game, the visit to Edgeley Park, is a memorable one. So that, even to the extent of like some of the children who go, there's a particular couple of people that go, they're autistic.
Yeah.
I kind of befriend them, and then I used to take them in the changing rooms and let them bring the match ball out and place on the plinth.
Yeah.
I mean, people say, why have you done that? Well, I've done that because he'll go into school on Monday and say, you'll never guess what I did on Saturday.
Exactly.
And it's just he's making those dreams, he's making those moments.
Yeah.
And you can't beat that. You cannot beat it.
No. And they're just small things as well, appreciating these small little things, and that can help, make somebody's day, that, that they're going to make them feel better because they've done something unique and something special. Again, it's, as you say, as you said at the start, and I 100% agree, which is why I spent so many hours, years looking at the brain and the power of the brain and mind. That, you know, the one thing that you can't take away is your memories. And you know, you want to make sure that when it is our time to leave this planet, that, you know, certainly my, you know, goal in life is, when it comes to that moment for me, is to be able to look back. You know, I want to be able to sit there and look back down that line of my life in history and just look back at it with enjoyment, you know, having no regrets, knowing that I gave it my all and that I enjoyed it, you know, and you run it, somebody and myself, you know, anybody is only going to be able to do that by having the experiences. You've got to create those memories. You've got to,
you're right.
You've got to get out in the world, and you've got to go and experience things. And sometimes that means you've got to experience the unpleasant, haven't you? You know, because it makes you appreciate the other things in life.
Definitely, yeah. And speaking of memories, I'm going to have to go in a minute because I forgot what my wife looks like.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, Nick, it's been absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate you giving up your time like this, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, Rob. Brilliant.
Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
See you now. Thank you.
Catch you later. Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers, Rob.
The Inner Game Podcast, brought to you by the Science of Excellence. Unleash your power. Book your free consultation now.